Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here, sipping on some delicious coffee. Here to introduce this week's episode of Tales from the Crypt with Hector Rosekrans, a veteran of the Naval Academy, a Bitcoiner, and currently working at Casa to help people secure their Bitcoin. We had an incredible conversation about how Hector came to find Bitcoin, his experience in the Navy, why he thinks Bitcoin is important, how the revolution that's being played out via Bitcoin may be able to spread democracy more than military might, how it is imperative that people take responsibility when securing their Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin compares to the Constitution, which has been a big theme on this podcast the last couple weeks, couple months. But we, actually, since the Trace Mayer podcast, we've really been diving into that, and Hector and I dove a little further. He's got a lot of strong thoughts, especially Bitcoin being Bitcoin being akin to a weapon. Giving individuals back power and an imperative as we head into the digital age. And this is actually, before we get into the ad read, something I've been seeing on Twitter. A lot of people debating about what is Bitcoin actually for. Is it for censorship-resistant transactions? Is it sound money? Is it a savings account? It's all things. A lot of people like to say it's a Swiss bank account in your pocket, but it's like a Swiss Army knife of monetary tools. You can use it to make the transactions they don't want you to make. It's going to help preserve your purchasing power over time. Your percentage of the whole pie is never going to be depreciated. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, so you can have solace in the fact that you have a good savings tool as well as a good censorship-resistant money. And you can even store data in it sometimes. It's not highly recommended depending on what the data is. It's very niche use cases. But again, it's a Swiss Army knife. It's a Swiss bank account in your pocket, but it's also cash in your pocket, digital cash that you can send anywhere. So don't let haters try to pigeonhole Bitcoin into one use case over the other. It is all things in one. It may be serving more people in a certain use case right now at this certain period of time, but hopefully it'll serve all use cases, not even equally. It'll just serve use cases when they need to be served, and hopefully it is serving people around the world. That was just a Wednesday morning tangent from your boy. Saw some shit on Twitter. This episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by Cash App. As you know, Cash App is the simplest way to send and save money. And now's the simplest way to try to grow your money. Introducing Cash App Investing. Unlike investing tools that only let you buy entire shares of stocks, Cash App lets you instantly invest as little or as much as you want. We're stacking slivers of shares now, freaks, on top of stacking sats. The Cash App still allows you to stack sats, send sats, receive sats, all that good stuff. Now we can stack slivers of shares. This way, when your favorite company's stock is just a little too expensive, you can still own a piece with as little as $1. Invest $1 in a stock. It might be $120. You can invest $1 in it. Because Cash App is directly connected to your bank account, there are no 4 to 5 day waiting periods for inbound transfers, so you can start investing today. Brokerage services are provided by Cash App Investing, a subsidiary of Square, and member SIPC. And as always, you freaks already know, when you use the code STACKINGSATS, that's one word, STACKINGSATS, you're now going to get $10 when you sign up for the Cash App, and then Cash App's going to send $10 to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse, a charity very near and dear to our hearts. Owls Lacrosse. Download the Cash App today. Use the code STACKINGSATS. And enjoy it, freaks. You only got one life. We're only here on this rock flying through space for one life. Get the most out of it, Work on things that are worthwhile. Enjoy the episode. Take care.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Ben here on a Tuesday night in the relegation studio, sitting down with a veteran, a Bitcoiner, somebody doing work with Casa as well. I want to introduce you freaks to Hector Rosekrans. Hector, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Totally.
How the hell are things going?
Things are good. Things are really good, man.
Yeah.
I get to spend all day talking to Bitcoiners at Casa, which is like the best job in the world. So I'm loving it.
How are the Bitcoiners you're talking to?
They're great. They're, we get all types. We get a lot of your listeners actually, and I love the diversity. We get hardcore tech people out of the Bay Area. We get libertarians from the Midwest, from all over the world. A total mix of just this, that, and the other. And yeah, it's a lot of fun talking to people, helping them get secure.
Yeah, man, secure. It's big on your mind. Before we hop into your story, I just want to refresh how you hopped onto my periphery. It was earlier this year. What issue was it? I had it up here. 461, which was written in April this year. Bitcoin as a weapon. You wrote a really great piece describing. It was really descriptive, really good writing. Just setting the scene for you being on the water while serving in
the Navy.
In the Navy, yeah, and comparing Bitcoin to an AK-47 and comparing the asymmetric leverage that the AK-47 provided to warfare. Bitcoin is sort of providing that to the digital age and digital warfare, if you will.
Exactly.
So let's jump into that a little later. How did you get into all this?
Yeah, well, I want to just go through my whole background, back through the military as well, because it really kind of feeds into my views on Bitcoin. So, grew up in America, incredibly privileged, just enjoy the amount of freedom that we have here, and I kind of took it for granted. All the way up until bright sunny September morning in 2001, I was a junior in high school, and playing to the towers is a monumental shift, I think, for everybody in the world. But for me in particular, I just, it suddenly kind of crystallized the fact that there are people out there who do not believe in the kinds of freedoms that we hold dear in this country. And they're willing to do tremendous amounts of violence to kind of fight against that. At that point in my life, it made a lot of sense for me, and I felt an obligation to join the military. Initial plan was to enlist in the Marine Corps. My parents were not super thrilled about that, so I think they told me, just go apply to a service academy, see what happens. I was fortunate to get an appointment to Annapolis, and that was kind of my initial entry into the military, was through the U.S. Naval Academy. And it turned out to be a perfect place for me to go to college. Not your typical college lifestyle in the slightest, which probably a good thing for me. I think that added structure was definitely helpful. But they kind of teach you two things at the Naval Academy. They teach you technology. It's an engineering school, which is critical because you need your officers to understand at a core level how systems work. You don't have time to call Raytheon tech support when you lose a generator in a battle exchanging missiles with the Chinese, and take a hit to the front, shuts down half of your radar array. How do you get it back up online? Don't really have a lot of time to talk to tech support. So a critical engineering understanding is pretty fundamental there. But the other piece of it is they teach you ethics, because they recognize that in order to be in the military, in order to have command of these weapons of mass destruction, you really need to make sure that the people that are wielding those know how to do it the right way and why they're doing it in the first place. So got into the ethics of warfare, got into the ethics of, operating a military within a constitutional republic, and ultimately got into the ethics underpinning the Constitution itself, where these freedoms come from, why negative rights like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, why these things all matter. And it also was this incredible way to kind of bond with your classmates, because you realize that from all walks of life, people have kind of come together in this place to learn the craft of warfare, but for the same reasons, and to kind of get that same ethical education at the same time. You graduate from that and you go out to the fleet, and that the people standing around you are with you on the mission, are with you on your view of the right way to do things and what really matters in this world. So it's kind of a truism in the military, you'll never be as close with the people that you with anyone else in your life than the people that you serve with. And I haven't quite found that to be the case, but we'll get into that in a minute. But standing up there on the bridge of my destroyer, center line, looking straight out the window, driving my ship, taking that left hand turn out of the San Diego harbor, and then setting a course west for the Pacific, surrounded by people that you know believe the same things that you do and are there to, work towards the same objectives that you are. It's such an incredibly powerful feeling. It was great. Then I got out because I realized that as much as I love the Navy, there were certain aspects of it were, just not necessarily for me long-term career-wise. But trying to figure out what's next. And it was tough because you struggle to find that. You struggle to find like that level of commitment, that level of, people that are as committed to ideas as you were in that role. And I tried politics. I went to grad school. I tried getting into tech. And everything kind of felt flat after leaving the military. So eventually I kind of decided, fuck it, I'm gonna make some money, work on Wall Street, whatever. And was fortunate enough to get a role at JP Morgan. And it was actually like there working in the belly of the beast that I came across the person who the next person I met who like had that same spark of like passion for ideas and for, transforming the world in a freedom loving way. And then from JP Morgan, I decided it was I guess, what happened there, and you're probably gonna have to cut all my rambling bullshit here.
No, not at all.
But yeah, so blockchain technology was kind of hot at the time, and I needed like an in. I needed to like figure out a way that I could like make myself more marketable in the bank, because I was just some idiot bro vet who had no background in finance. Had the engineering training from the Naval Academy, and I was like, okay, if I lean into the engineering side, if I learn how this stuff actually works, that's gonna make me valuable, and then I can have a career as like a managing director running the blockchain team, which is what I was aspiring to do. When I found this open source meetup group called BitDevs, and I was like, oh well, I'll check this out, see what these guys are talking about. Walked into that room, and I realized that all these crazy nerds were actually doing the exact same thing that I was doing at the Naval Academy. These are people that care about technology, care about how it works, but care about doing it in such a way that you're promoting freedom. And once I kind of like understood that that's what was at the core of driving the Bitcoin movement, it totally shifted my perspective. And like, I got that same feeling of like being surrounded by people that were working towards those same objectives of, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, like all these core freedoms that we have in America. And these people are building open source tools that do those exact same things. And what's even better is like, we have that in America. It doesn't really work out all that well when we try to export that using our military force around the world. But if this stuff is open source, if this stuff is open to anyone in the world who can, decide to run a node, download a Bitcoin wallet, do whatever it takes to be a part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, like you can opt in to those freedoms yourself, no matter where you live.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, do you think freedom-enabled technologies like Bitcoin are more effective than spreading democracy via the military these days?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think that trying to force it's a weird thing to try to force freedom on somebody. It's like it's kind of a paradox. It doesn't really work.
So let's dive more into that. Like, you joined the military right after 9/11. What was your military experience like? Like what did you see personally? What do you have any thoughts on sort of like the way the Iraq War has gone since you embarked on your journey to join the military and enlist?
Totally. Well, let me start with just my, when I fell in love with the surface Navy, which is what I did. I was a surface warfare officer, which means you're kind of on the pipeline to become the captain of a ship someday. And I fell in love with that job pulling into New York Harbor when I was 19 years old. I was a midshipman. It was just after my first year at the Naval Academy when they treat you like total dog shit for the whole year and just haze you relentlessly. So already kind of feeling good. But I was just, I happened to be on the watch. I was driving our little 120-foot training vessel called a yard patrol craft into the harbor. And we were definitely supposed to call up the senior officers and the chiefs and the upperclassmen when we were pulling into New York. But the guy who was in charge of doing that, the first class, was asleep in his chair. So I was just driving. I was working with couple of 19-year-olds, and we just like drove straight under the Narrows and into the harbor on a Saturday morning in the summer. Like pleasure boats everywhere, Staten Island ferry zipping in and out, Statue of Liberty over there. You literally like came into New York Harbor at the same way that like people coming into Ellis Island would see the city for the first time. And especially after 9/11, it was very fresh in everyone's minds at that time. Just having that experience of being like on my own, driving the ship, going in and seeing New York for the first time was incredible. And then obviously going out in the city at 19 years old, when you're wearing summer whites, people don't check your IDs all that carefully. Won't get into too much of the details from that night, but yeah, definitely.
Please do. I'm kidding. I'm not going to force you to go there.
But yeah, so that was like my intro to, that was like my first time in New York, and was just made me fall in love with going to sea and just like the cool. You get to see the world. You get to do this incredible stuff. My service, I was on the ship the whole time. I did 3 deployments around the world, 2 out of the West Coast, 1 out of the East Coast. Always met up in the Middle East, doing a bunch of different work. We did some counter-piracy operations. I talked about that a bit in my piece. That was actually like, that's what got all the press, but the pirates were low key, like cool dudes. They were bros. They see you show up on the horizon and you watch them like on the video screen, like throwing their weapons overboard and claiming to be fishermen. I was like, dude, your fish hook's rotted. I picked this up. I see like a spare AK-47 bandolier down there. Clearly you're not fishermen, but they would swear up and down they were fishermen. So you can't really do anything about them. Kind of catch and release there. But, the bad guys that we dealt with were terrorists, basically smuggling guns, people, and drugs from the coast of Pakistan down to the Horn of Africa. We would, we were kind of goalie. So anyone who didn't get picked up in Afghanistan or didn't get picked up by, whoever was the cops or the intelligence services in Pakistan and actually made it to the water, we were the kind of the last line of defense against those guys. So a lot of boardings, a lot of kind of checking people out and making sure that everyone has their documents in order. We were a little bit like the highway cops of the high seas. A lot of fun, a great mission. I got to train an incredible team, and that was the other thing is my commands really early on just gave me a lot of autonomy in terms of, all right, here's a mission. You can go ahead and run this yourself. You can, train the team, make sure they get to all the right schools, train them up during deployment. Like, we're sailors, we're not SEALs or anything like that. Everyone has a day job working in, IT systems or turning wrenches down in engineering or standing watch up on the bridge. So, these weren't like, trained infantry or anything like that. But getting that team to kind of come together and build up this capability that we were then able to use quite a bit on deployment was just a ton of fun.
Yeah, no, I've said this many times in the past. I actually worked for a naval captain for like eight summers.
Nice.
And he would tell me stories of taking the ships down the Mississippi and blowing up stranded ships and stuff like that. And it's a stressful job too, right? Like, because
definitely.
Handling this heavy machinery. Like, wasn't there just an incident like 6 or 7 months ago in the Strait of Hormuz or whatever, where ran into like Iran ship or no?
I'm trying to think. So the 2 incidents that I remember from a ways back were, there were 2 collisions over the summer of 2017. And those were horrific Navy collisions, Navy destroyers, the kind of ship that I was on.
This is what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Yeah. These horrific accidents. These ships collided, and there were 2 of them in the same summer. This was one of the things that kind of turned me off to the surface fleet when I was there. As much as I love the people and I love the mission, I love the work, there was never enough resources for enough people on these ships. We were chronically undermanned, and it was I could see it coming a mile away that you're going to have some incidents like this. It comes as no surprise, when you look at the deployment rotation schedules, the watch rotation schedules. I mean, I went months without like getting a full night's sleep, without having my sleep constantly interrupted by watch rotations, all these cycles, and it really wears you down and burns you out. And I think that it's a weird thing because on the one hand, like, it was an underinvestment in that part of the fleet that led to those collisions and those tragedies. I know it's weird to like say that we don't spend enough money on the military. But for what we ask the military to do, we don't spend enough money on it. And, I don't think that the answer is to, let's jack up the defense budget and spend a ton more money on it. I think the answer is to prioritize what we actually want to do with our, with the military. And then we can decide how to fund those things in the most appropriate way to the best level, but in a way that you're not just kind of stealing some money from over here, robbing Peter to pay Paul, because we have this new objective, this new mission that just came down from our political leaders for reasons that pass comprehension of anybody on the ground.
How much do contractors get in the way?
Contractors, not a ton.
How much do they take up of our military budget?
It's really hard to say how much, because actually I'm sure there's statistics on that. I have no idea. For me, the biggest issue I think is that there's just a lack of accountability and there's mission creep everywhere. So the biggest thing that I look at is the deficit exploded under George W. Bush. It went, and I'd have to look at specific numbers, but both the debt and the deficit, after Clinton basically balanced the budget at the end of his tenure, which doesn't mean the debt was gone. It just means that we weren't adding to the debt. It just totally took off under George W. Bush. And a lot of that was spending on the military, and a lot of that was spending on these wars. And, one of the things that got me excited about Bitcoin was this idea that, I don't think that the American public would have been so easily led, down the rabbit hole to agree to an invasion of Iraq if it meant that we had to levy an additional tax to pay for that. And that was one of the kind of key ideas that brought me on the Bitcoin train, was just our inability to have any fiscal discipline whatsoever is what allows our military to, it's not even our military, but our national security leadership to decide that, this is a good idea, so let's just go do it and not worry too much about the consequences, because there's no sense of economy. There's no sense of what happens if we run out of money, or what happens if no one wants to pay for this, because someone's always going to pay for it.
There's no sense of accountability too, right? At the end of the day.
What was that?
There's no sense of accountability at the end of the day too.
There's no accountability. If we don't have to, if the American taxpayer doesn't have to pay a bill for the war, it's sure, that sounds like a good idea. Let's go freedom and democracy in all over the Middle East during the Arab Spring, not taking into account what the second order, the third order, the fourth order, questions are going to be there, and issues that can pop up, and I think that if we actually had to pay for this stuff and we had to pay for it up front, there would be people would think a lot harder about do I really want to invest my taxpayer dollars? Do I want my taxes to be raised to fight this fight? And that's not to say that the answer is always no. There's going to be times when it's hey, look, it's Hitler, Nazi Germany, and everyone's on board with that.
And if anything, it makes you explore more diplomatic options more earnestly before you go to war, right?
Exactly. And that's a really big piece of it, is that diplomatic options leave the door open for more stuff down the road, whereas war just kind of tends to beget more war and more war. I mean, the Iran-Iraq war bled into Iraq 1, Iraq 2, now whatever's happening in Syria, and somehow Iraq has morphed into Syria, and nobody kind of noticed that we're still operating under the same laws that were for invading Afghanistan in 2001.
So what do you think of that as a warrior, somebody who's been to war, somebody who's had skin in the game? Again, we were saying it may not be as effective as something like Bitcoin is in enabling the freedoms that spreading democracy claims that it's trying to do. Do you think there's an awakening happening of people realizing that, hey, maybe this isn't working out, we should seek alternatives? Or
Yeah, I do. The thing that I got really excited about was there's Obama put down the red line in Syria. I think that was in 2014 or 2015, maybe 2016. We put down the red line in Syria, and he said, if you cross this red line, we're going to war. And guess what? The American public said no. We don't want to go to war. We've already done this. We've seen this show before. This is not what we want to do. And there was a very strong backlash against that. And I think that a big part of the reason for that was just the way in which social media had kind of changed the game since 2003 when we did Iraq. And there was just a lot of voices out there in this kind of distributed fashion that could stand up and say, no, we don't want to do that. We're not going to listen to what the New York Times, what the Washington Post, what the Wall Street Journal are telling us. We're going to listen to what people that we respect on Twitter are saying because we can access that information. And there are these more channels, and that ultimately was able to put some political pressure on the administration to say like, okay, no, we actually can't go that route.
More importantly, I think it gives a voice to the other too. So with Syria and the line that you're speaking of, like I remember Syrians like getting on Twitter and joining the hashtag conversations, being like, please, like we're just normal people like you trying to get by, and that empathy creation.
Totally, and that ability to communicate with people, like that's part of why I love America. Because guess what? Twitter's an American company. It is fundamentally founded in freedom of speech. And I know there's all kinds of drama in the tech politics world about the best way to approach that stuff. But if you kind of go in with that baseline of Twitter was able to probably stop an American war, and was able to do that because it empowered not only ordinary Americans and gave them voice, but also gave voice to people in other countries who could then communicate with Americans, with the electorate. That to me is like, that's like the best version of free speech and American capitalism coming together.
And it feels like there's a stack developing, right? Like the internet and the apps built on top of it, like Twitter, the communication stack. Like we can share our ideas, and 20, 30 years into the internet becoming popular, we have the value layer of the stack now with Bitcoin, and it seems like it's additive to what's been created up to this point.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's another tool in the toolkit of freedom. I think that speech has really gotten super powerful because of the internet. One of kind of my fundamental beliefs that I developed at JP Morgan was that really what was missing for a long time was the value layer. And if there's no way to value ideas, if there's no way to like, to exchange value in the same kind of medium that you're working with in the digital realm, like spam is a huge problem. And you can say spam explicitly in your email, or spam in terms of credit right sock puppets or what have you. But this idea that like there's no way to value content in a differentiated way means that you just get this huge spam problem. And yeah, it's great, everyone has a voice. But as my old drill instructor liked to say, opinions are like assholes. Everyone has them. Most of them stink.
Yeah, I think my asshole stinks.
Probably. I mean, most of them do. So, but yeah, that's like, when Bitcoin provides that opportunity, got really excited about that. Now I did get sucked down the shitcoin rabbit hole for a while. I spent some quality time doing that.
Before we get into your shitcoin rabbit hole, could you move your phone to the other side, because it creates disturbance while it's near the lines. You can keep it on. You don't have to put it on airplane mode.
It's not.
We all get dragged into shitcoins. I did as well.
Yeah.
We all make this mistake. How did you make it?
Well, so I was still really excited by the ideas in the shitcoin space. The ideas of like, hey, what does it mean to have a decentralized autonomous organization? I also think that the signal to noise ratio, what I didn't realize is that for the 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 people that like really cared about doing that stuff the right way, it was just attracting scammers from everywhere. And that ultimately, like what I cared about the most was working on the most secure chain that had like the most value to it and the most potential ability to withstand attacks and the most potential ability to change people's lives in the near term. I think that we will get the cornucopia of ideas that came out of 2017. I think that we'll have all those in 15, 20 years, maybe even less. But I think that you have to have some real fundamental value in the core chain, in the beginning and before we get there. Like that's what happened in 1999. Like every failed startup from 1999 is now a $1 billion company. But guess what? You didn't have the infrastructure. You didn't have the stuff that you need for those to succeed when they all pumped to the moon and then crashed to zero and everyone lost all their money.
Yeah. And most of them died off, and you had the Amazons, the Googles, the other survivors of the dot-com bubble of the world who made it, and what I've been saying more recently, what I'm interested to hear your thoughts on is, I think we're going to get everything like DAOs, like decentralized autonomous organizations. We'll get them at some point in the future. I don't think anytime soon. On top of that, like I think smart contracts and DeFi will be built on layers on top of Bitcoin. But I do believe earnestly, and I'm becoming more sort of confident in this view more recently, is that there's an order of operations to all this, right? Like you can only have all those things, those functionalities, if the base layer is secure and sufficiently distributed and decentralized, and then only from there can you build the apps which need to leverage the assurances that are embedded at the protocol level. Right?
Yeah, exactly. You need security, and then you need liquidity, and then you can get applications. Like I think that that's just the very basic stack. There might be a couple different layers. There's different approaches to all those things. If someone has a better solution than proof of work, which outlives Bitcoin, great. I don't think it's going to happen because you also have to tackle the social consensus and a lot of the other issues inherent in this stuff. But, you know, security is what I care about the most. It's the most pressing issue. I think it's going to be the most pressing issue for a while. And that's why what I like to work on is UX for security.
Right. And then it's not even as easy to say it's like security and then, security and what was the second thing? Liquidity. Security and liquidity. Like with security comes multiple things. Like you're working on multi-sig security, like literally securing the UTXOs that represent the Bitcoin that you own. But from there, like you have to think about network security, securing yourself against ISP attacks, securing yourself against node centralization. So ensuring that the chain state is at such a size that it can be run on hardware that people can download it on and participate and validate their transactions, their incoming transactions, most importantly. So it's like checking off those boxes. And this is something, again, I'm just rambling here and thinking out loud about something I've been thinking in my head by myself for like the last couple of weeks. Like, do you have to check all those boxes, and when can you say that those boxes are checked? And then from there, is it only then that you can have all the applications that we're speaking of?
Well, I think that the core point is that we can't compromise on the security questions. I think that that's really the biggest thing. And that was like one of the big aha moments for Bitcoin for me was the UASF and the heroes and the leaders that like made that happen and said, no, fuck you, we're doing it this way.
There are no leaders.
Exactly. I know there's no leaders. There's nobody with influential voices or making hats or podcasts, but that's the beautiful thing is that everyone can play a role. But yeah, like when I saw that happen, I was like, wow, Bitcoin's immune system is no joke. And what you're protecting when you protect that is you're protecting the ability of that guy who manages to get a Raspberry Pi 4 and a internet connection in Iran, who wants to run Bitcoin Pay server and take it. Like you are protecting his ability to be a fully self-sovereign Bitcoiner and not have to find out how to like invest in a ton of hardware. And like that person can run a node. That person can be their own like, self-sovereign Bitcoin node on the network and with the same rights and the same obligations that everyone else has. And like protecting that guy is why is why we make the technical trade-offs that we do, is why you don't scale on chain, is why you do a lot of these things. And there's some hard questions in there that I'm really happy that sharp people are working on. But like if that's kind of the ultimate objective here, is like the most accepted currency is going to be the one that requires the least amount of capital overhead to operate. I think that's the approach that you want to make, because that's what's going to make the thing the most saleable to the most number of people around the world.
I think that was beautifully put. Right, and the barrier to entry has to be as low as possible, and so do you think that has been getting better or worse throughout time?
I think it's hard to say. I think it's been getting better in terms of the tooling and the technology that is available. Like I said, Casa, we focus a lot on UX. UX is what I care about. Usable multi-sig. It is what allows you to not just be a fully sovereign Bitcoiner, but be one in perpetuity, because no one wants to do Glacier Protocol, and no one especially wants to teach their wife and their kids to do Glacier Protocol. I think there's a lot of other solutions out there. I think that ours is great, and I think that ours is great because we put the user first, and we put user experience kind of at the center of that, because ultimately that's what's going to drive adoption. That's going to drive people to choose these better self-sovereign alternatives versus, I'm just going to throw it in Coinbase. I'm just going to throw it in Zappo. I'm just going to throw it in this custodial thing, and I have an IOU that is good for Bitcoin until someone decides that it's not.
Yeah, no, and it's important to get away from that, and that's from those tendencies of holding it on a custodian, and it's a big fear for people. Taking control of their own wealth. It comes with extreme responsibility.
Yeah, so this is another thing that I really think that like Bitcoin is not just about, everyone, go shill to your relatives, pump the moon Lambos, whatever. I do think that Bitcoin is going to appreciate massively in value, but
Lambos are cheesy.
What?
Lambos are cheesy.
Lambo, I agree. But at the same time, like, it's a responsibility. Like, Bitcoin's a responsibility. It is a responsibility to hold your own wealth. It is like, it's like owning a gun. It's like, this is a technical tool that can be critical to your safety, your family's welfare and safety. And like, if you learn how to use it, you have that. That is a tool you have in your back pocket to protect you against nearly all comers. The state could still get you, but if you and your friends and your family and your town are also all holding, they're not going to get it. They can, they're powerful enough to take Bitcoin from a couple people, not from a large number of people who stand up and say no. And no state is that powerful. At the same time, it's real easy to fuck yourself, and it is real easy to lose your money. It is real easy to lose your keys and just be one of those horror stories on Reddit of digging through the dumpster to find that whatever it is, that $600 million laptop that's just gone forever. So, having that approach of like, this is a incredible tool and gives you incredible power, but also comes with a lot of responsibility. I think that's the way to think about it. Like, I sometimes think about like my role at Casa. I'm basically training people how to use the product and training people how to use, associated just like general Bitcoin products that are out there. And I think of myself a little bit as like, back in my drill instructor days when I was teaching people to use Weapon, and it's like, okay, this is my this is my treasure. There are many like it, but this one is my own. This is the Mark 1 Mod 2 Model T is a fantastic piece of equipment for securing your assets, but combine it in a standard issue Casa 3.5 multisig, and you have like a real tool for protecting your wealth. You have to understand how to use it, because you can fuck yourself. But if you understand how to use it, and we try to make it as easy as possible, then you really, you have this power, and and you can take it with you wherever you go. And that includes, escaping from bad regimes that want to do evil things to you and your family, if it comes down to it. Like, I love all my American clients. The people that get me out of bed every day are the people that are, live in places or might live in places where that's a real threat for them. And I honestly don't know where a lot of my clients live, because you can use the service anonymously. But I definitely know that there's at least a few people who are thinking those thoughts when they sign up for our service.
What is their number one concern? Just they want.
I think their number one concern is that Casa isn't going to fuck them. And that's a big concern for everyone, as it should be. As if you're thinking about that, like, you're the right kind of client. And there's a lot of ways in which we have our system designed so that we cannot screw you over. That also means that if you fuck yourself, we can't help you. Sovereign recovery is a big one that we go through and all our clients talk about. What that means is that we give you the instructions for how to build your exact same multisig account that operates the exact same way, but using open source tools. Casa is a pretty purple interface with a lot of thought into the security model and the user experience and the design. But under the hood, it is a standard issue P2 WSH Bitcoin multi-sig contract that you can build in Electrum with a little bit of a, a little bit of elbow grease on the open source side.
Yeah. So let's get back to like the power that this gives the individual, right? Like in your piece, Bitcoin as a weapon, you talked about asymmetric money. Cypherpunks have been building tools for individual liberty, freedom to communicate, and the right to privacy for decades, but the rest of the world moved faster. Netscape, Oracle, all these centralized companies have won out up to this point. How does Bitcoin help us protect against these companies like the AK-47 helped these guerrilla warfare like militias fight bigger armies?
So that's a great question. The fundamental thing is just it's about providing the incentive for cryptography. It's about providing the incentive to like make asymmetric cryptography actually user friendly. We all know that not your keys, not your coins. If they are your keys, they're your coins. But guess what? That's the incentive for us to solve this problem, to make private keys actually like usable by the end user, by the individual person. But if we solve that, like you got those private keys laying around, you're not moving your Bitcoin all that much. What else can we secure with those private keys? If we solve private key management, if private key management is basically like you can assume that as a solved problem the way that developers can assume that mobile applications is a solved problem, that like you will have a phone that is connected to the internet with you anywhere you go. There's an incredible amount that we can do to kind of re-architect the infrastructure of the internet. Right now you have these thin clients, your phones, they're basically calling back to servers everywhere all the time. Google servers, Amazon servers, Facebook servers, doesn't matter. Like you're talking to, through your app, you're talking to these giant servers everywhere. And there's just like no way to do privacy effectively with that kind of architecture. However, if we're able to do private key management ourselves, and what we can start doing is we can start storing data back in the home computing. It's not about the Internet of Things, which is really just the Internet of shit of, devices calling back to Amazon.
A great Twitter account to follow, by the way. The Internet is shit.
I'm a fan. But yeah, if actually you're calling back to a server that you run at home that is secured with your encryption keys, that is your critical data, your critical financial data, your critical health data, your critical, family data, whatever else it is that's like critical to your life, if you're securing that data with the same keys or the same key setup that you're using to secure your Bitcoin, that means that we can turn on its head the architecture of the internet and really give the power of data back to the end users and the generators of the data, the people.
How much have you looked into Urbit?
That is on my perpetual crap. I need to sit down and figure out Urbit list. I have not looked into it. I'm a bad Bitcoiner because I don't know enough about Urbit. It's like I know it's out there. I'm like keeping my eye on it. I'm like, at some point I'm gonna have time to like go and just do the Urbit rabbit hole.
Well, it's very contentious amongst Bitcoiners.
Really?
A lot of Bitcoiners who love it a lot, and a lot who think it's a scam.
Well, I don't have enough information to have an opinion one way or the other as of yet.
I'm still trying to decide. I like what you just described, like that idea of self-compute and holding your own data. I think that's from what I understand, again, that's the biggest problem with Urbit is it's very hard to understand, very esoteric in a lot of places. But from what I understand, that's the problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that you have to understand Urbit to get access to the forums where people can explain Urbit. So it's kind of a little bit of a chicken and the egg problem there, but I don't know.
Yeah. You have to be able to hoon. You have to be able to hoon their programming language.
Yeah.
And I'm not shilling anything here. I'm genuinely curious if you knew anything about it because, again, the thing you just described, self-compute and storing your own data, it's very appealing to me. But the UX around that, like how, obviously, it seems that UX around Bitcoin is getting better, but like the UX of holding your own data and actually having that extreme responsibility, do you think we're going to have like a cultural shift?
I think a little bit, but I think it's already happening. I do think that we're getting there. Like, the things that if I don't understand Urbit yet, I do, things I understand, like the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. Like it says that thou must have a warrant. That's not exactly what the words say, but like, illegal search and seizure, The cops can't do that. The government can't do that. If you're holding the data, they need to come with a warrant that says, I can access this stuff. One thing that was really a major problem with the Fourth Amendment for a long time was this thing called third-party doctrine. And third-party doctrine came out of the 1960s and 70s, and it's this legal idea. It came out of some Supreme Court cases that said, if you're turning your data over to a third party, you're giving up your Fourth Amendment protections, and the government can do whatever it wants. So the idea being like, if you give up your financial information to a bank, if you give up your communications information to the telephone company, you have sacrificed your Fourth Amendment protections under the law. That fortunately has started to be pushed back on by the court in the most recent ruling. I believe it was Carpenter that basically said
it's such a chicken shit law.
What's that?
Such a chicken shit law.
Yeah, it's completely
like all these utilities that you're going to have to leverage. Like
exactly, and like the way that obviously the internet has grown, the financial system has grown like as massively, as third-party doctrine has been expanded. It's just totally undercut all the Fourth Amendment in practice entirely because our lives are digital, and what we need a return to this idea that like no, just because you're turning this stuff over to a cloud provider doesn't mean that you are sacrificing your rights to it. I think that if we have a basic standard of like everything should be encrypted, that is an action that people can take that's showing like, no, I do not want the third party to access this, and I do not give my consent to the government to search this without a warrant. And if we start, if there's services that start doing that, I think that's going to push back in the right direction. The court did just have another case that started to kind of cut away at third-party doctrine. The Carpenter decision was about basically saying that the cops need to get a warrant to get your location data using cell phone towers. Third-party doctrine said like, oh, well, you're paying for a data service and these cell phone towers can triangulate you. So because third-party doctrine, the cops can just go and arrest you based on finding your location through cell phone tower tracking. And the court said, no.
But how effective is that, though? Like, yes, they said no, but the Stingray devices still exist. All those very invasive metadata collecting surveillance techniques still exist. Like, even if you do have the precedent, like the Carpenter case, like you just explained, like even if that does go through court and work in our benefit per se, like, should we just be working to make it so it's impossible to even do that in the first place?
Absolutely. I mean, we should be working on tools that empower individual liberty, no matter what. At the same time, I also think that it's important to fight these fights through the political process and through the legal process. And it's much better, we're privileged to live in a country where that's an option. I want those tools to exist to fight the...
But is it getting more arduous and decaying in quality, the process throughout time? The further we get away from the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
See, but I'm optimistic, and I am optimistic that technology and that ideas like Bitcoin are going to turn the tide and are going to help be a part of this tide turning.
I am too. And that's why I focus on Bitcoin, because I don't think... So the point I'm trying to get at here is I am a jaded individual who does not think that working through the traditional political system is effective, and I focus my time and energy on Bitcoin because I think that is a higher leverage activity to actually getting change that I want to see in the world happen, or making the change that I want to see in the world come to fruition, right?
I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I don't think you need to be jaded about it. I'm incredibly optimistic about it. Like, I think that Bitcoin is showing people that there's a better future. It's like, look, if we can stop this, if we can like stop some of this madness, we can create a much better, much freer, much more open and optimistic world. And for me, like as an American, I would say like, I want to make the case that this is better for our values. If you're in a country that doesn't support those values, I want you to have the tools to fight that country. But I don't think that America is that country. And I push back on people that say like, oh, we're too far gone. It's like, no, we can change here. Like stuff still works.
Oh, I completely agree.
So I think that's kind of where I come down on that. But yeah, if you're in a totalitarian state, you need the tools, and Bitcoin's one of those tools.
Yeah, no, and Bitcoin, again, it's one of those tools. It's not a panacea. That's what we're coming to find. But again, it is another arrow in the quiver. And the last conversation I had on this podcast was with Matt Alborg, who's been doing the incredible research on P2P exchange data, talking about how individuals in Nigeria are using it just as one payment rail in a very elaborate scheme to basically just move money from the U.S. to Nigeria.
That's incredible. That is so cool.
Yeah, but it again, it's people, and that's what I'm trying to get here at, because I've been having a couple of conversations around this the last couple of days as well, is that people want Bitcoin to be everything out of the box right away, and they don't appreciate the process and the fact that it's not going to be completely scalable out of the box. It's not going to be completely private out of the box, whether you like it or not. It's just the cards we've been dealt, and I believe it is getting more private over time, and privacy assurances are certainly not up to snuff right now, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they are getting better.
I was definitely appreciate the argument. I'm not sure that on-chain privacy is a desirable goal. I want the ability for private transactions, but I guess I worry about the.
Oh, just speak closer to the mic.
Oh yeah, I guess like what I worry about is just adjust a little bit. Like you have this problem. Like what killed gold again and again and again was this issue where people were saying, "Oh yeah, don't worry, it's backed by gold," but there's no way to verify that. The on-chain. The lack of on-chain privacy is also our ability to like actually make sure there's only 21 million of these things. That is like our ability to audit the UTXOs and make sure that this really is sound money. So while I want privacy, I want people to have that option. At the same time, I'm hesitant about some of the proposed. If there's a proposed solution that would like eliminate the ability of us to verify the integrity of the UTXO set, I do kind of worry about that a bit.
No, I wholeheartedly agree, and I do think there is a happy medium, right? Like there is so the point at which you just have to make the cost of surveillance too expensive, right? And I don't think you need complete confidential transactions, the actual technical spec at the protocol level, which would enable us, give us the inability to audit the supply. I don't think we need to go that far to get the sufficient privacy needed. To also be able to audit the supply, right? Yeah. Like we can do something like if Schnorr and Taproot get instituted and things like Snicker or PDEP get better, and you get creative with side chains like Liquid and second layers like Lightning Network to do very elaborate coin join setups. Like you can make it so the cost for the chain analysis of the world to actually try to expend the resources to try to follow you around the blockchain is such that it's just not worth it. And you could, at the end of the day, track transactions, but the cost is such that it's not worth it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good approach and a good way to think about it, because if what you want is you want the ability to go after bad people, and and what you don't want is you don't want the ability to have a dragnet that can catch everybody. Like if someone is breaking the law to the extent that they are, already the target of a state level investigation, like you want chain analysis or potentially more powerful tools that are entirely government funded to be able to go after those people and find them and identify them. What you don't want is you don't want that to be scalable to the point that they can just do what they do now, which is dump all the data in a data center and just peruse it for any potential infraction of any magnitude. Like that's how you get the financial panopticon. But this actually gets to, I think the North Korea question, which I think is one of the hardest questions in Bitcoin.
You got strong thoughts on some people visiting North Korea recently?
Yeah, I mean, the Kim regime is one of the most evil places, one of the most evil in the world. I mean, they keep their entire population of North Korea basically enslaved for the benefit of a few elites. Forget the nuclear weapons that they have. They have enough artillery pointed at Seoul to level that city and kill millions and millions of people within the span of about 30 minutes. And that's not talking about nuclear weapons. That's just old school artillery in hardened mountain positions that are dialed in to residential neighborhoods to basically commit mass slaughter should anyone try to take them out. This is the regime we're talking about here. And if you are going to North Korea, that means you have the permission of the regime. I am known through some breaches of the U.S. The U.S. personnel system. I am known as someone with a military background who had clearance at one point, and I'm sure that if I were to show up in North Korea, I'd be arrested as a spy on day one. And the question you have to ask if they're letting you in North Korea is who you're supporting there and who's letting you in. So that's just, if those guys are going to figure it out, how to use this stuff to evade sanctions, let them do that themselves. Let's not help them if we believe in the values of this ecosystem. That said, I do think that there's a kind of beautiful solution to this, which is, this is a free tip for the CIA. If you're out there, they're listening to the bent.
They're actually huge fans.
In a world where the U.S. is embracing Bitcoin, yes, that does mean empowering individuals, and that does mean, in some circumstances, empowering individuals who wield a lot of dictatorial power, whether they're in Venezuela or North Korea right now. But it's hard to secure your keys. It is hard to secure them if you're a nobody pleb with a whatever avatar on Twitter. It is really hard if you are a known like international most wanted, and you're known to be holding a lot of Bitcoin. If I were the CIA, I would offer a bounty for those coins. I would say, you know what, you turn those private key material over to us. We're not going to ask questions about who you are. We're not going to ask questions about where you got them. You're going to get a one-way ticket. SEAL Team 6 is going to come pick you up, take you on a nice submarine ride back to America. We'll give you a new face. We'll give you some clean coins so that they can't track you. And let the internal politics of a totalitarian regime, how well do you think Mr. Kim is going to sleep at night knowing that every single person around him is incentivized with a hell of a lot of Bitcoin and freedom in America to get his coin away from him?
Quasi-assassination markets.
I mean, yeah, but for murderous dictators, and when the result is a bloodless coup.
I'm not against it. I like that. I like that idea. And so is this your idea to solve the nuclear crisis that I was alluding to before we hit record?
I don't know if this is going to solve the nuclear crisis. What I think this would do is this would disincentivize authoritarians to hold, to steal Bitcoin from their people, because there's always going to be that risk that one of your trusted lieutenants is going to turn and murder you and steal your coin and run off and leave you empty-handed. So that's my solution to the dictators with Bitcoin problem.
Yeah, no, the incentives are strong. And what I was alluding to is my favorite quote of the week right now, was the piece by Elaine O that she wrote this morning. You haven't read it yet, but it basically described, all right, you want to bring peace to North Korea. You want to, particularly with their nuclear warhead situation, and you want to de-escalate the nuclear presence of North Korea. What you do is you force them to mine Bitcoin with that nuclear energy. They can reduce that down to uranium that can be made into nuclear reactors that can provably add a hash rate to the Bitcoin blockchain, that you can prove that they're denuclearizing by mining Bitcoin, and they're definitely not making warheads because that uranium is being used for other purposes. I thought that was very creative.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I kind of like that. I think that you'd have to figure it out, because the issue is that the kind of nuclear reactor that runs on normal nuclear fuel versus the ones that you would need to run on the highly enriched uranium that go into nuclear weapons are a very different kind of setup. So you need to make sure that they are really using the highly enriched version and not faking it with 1% of their stockpile on the other version. That would be my one immediate technical objection to that. But yeah, it sounds kind of interesting. I mean, the issue there is I don't think that North Korea has any incentive to come to the table for nuclear de-escalation in the first place.
And I think Elaine may have been a bit facetious, and that was, I don't want to say it was facetious, but it is putting forward of opportunity costs. Hey, you can either build these nuclear wars that if you shoot one off, there's a good chance the way that nuclear game theory works out, that if you shoot one off, we're going to shoot one off, and they're going to shoot one off, and we're going to end the world. So you can either use that uranium to build these nukes that just add to the risk of us blowing up this planet, or you could use that to turn it into sound digital money and that you can hold. We may not like you, but if you're using that nuclear energy to mine a sound currency instead of blow up the world, right, we'll take the net positive there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the best approach to any of our foreign policy problems, like, you want to lean into what we do well in America. Like, we do freedom well. We do freedom well in this country. We do innovation well. And so any approach to a problem that takes those into account, that kind of leads with those, I think is our strongest play.
And it's, you don't even have to apply this to North Korea alone. Like, do it to Russia, China, us. Like, if we were like, hey, we'll use some of this extra uranium. We have the most nuclear warheads on Earth.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think it's a good idea. I think that really what you want, my concern is that, I think that the U.S. I think that we're losing some of our footing, some of our power in the world. And I think that, like, our financial power is one of the ones that's been incredibly useful for us. Like, we use our financial power to go after the Iranian nuclear program for great effect. Hang on, let me just mess with this thing for a second.
Yeah, perfect right there.
There we go. All right. So yeah, we use our financial power for great effect to slow down the Iranian nuclear program, and it worked. The problem is that they still want it, and that's due to some foreign policy decisions that we have made, and just their own national interests. The other problem is that now that we've kind of played that card, the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and a lot of people are trying to route around that, and they're going to be successful. If we try to rely on this financial tool,
push it forward a little bit.
Away from me?
Yeah,
like there?
Perfect.
Yeah, if we try to rely on our financial power to continue to do this, we're going to ultimately kind of burn out that card, and we're going to leave the US dollar in a much worse place.
Yeah, it's happening quicker than I think a lot of people expect.
Exactly. And that's why, like, if we were to lean into Bitcoin, I think that would be a massively beneficial thing for our country, our national security, and our long-term interests. I mean, Bitcoin is not going to work in a totalitarian country because people aren't going to trust it unless they can hold it themselves. If they know that, like, this is actually how it works, they're not going to trust it unless they can hold themselves. And if they can hold themselves, then the government can't inflate it away and can't use, whatever power they've achieved to, like, fund insane military projects, insane projects that are, like, counter to individual freedom. Like, if we lean into this stuff, yes, does it disrupt our financial power a little bit in the short run? A little bit. But at the same time, what we get is a global financial system that is pegged by something that is born of the same values that the U.S. Constitution was based on, that has incredible risks for anyone that wants to concentrate power with it, because someone can just, slit your throat in the middle of the night and steal your private keys. And ultimately is going to be the thing that, like, increases liberty for everyone around the world.
So what does a U.S. government lean in look like? Like, how do we ensure that they don't fuck this up?
That's a great question. I think that what I actually think the best approach for this would be, and I'm kind of coming to this right now, is you start small. Bitcoin is a decentralized system. You want to start with the smallest unit possible. And what I would say is, if you are a state treasury, you should invest in a little Bitcoin. If you are a pension fund that has state employees, you should invest in a little Bitcoin. If you are, you don't need the permission of the U.S. Department of the Treasury to do this. Each state is sovereign. There's plenty of government entities that can do this on their own and can start to look towards this future. I think that a lot of them are scared because a lot of them see like the risks and the things that Treasury is concerned about. But I think that if there's a shift and we see that, like, this is actually an American good, that this is valuable from the American perspective, I think that, individual small groups, small pools of money can start to say, like, hey, let's hold on to a little bit of this just in case, because it is aligned with our values and it could be a bulwark against risk that's coming down the line. I think that's the kind of first step that starts to normalize it, that starts to get people excited about it. If the Fed wants to go out tomorrow or the Treasury wants to go out tomorrow and put some Bitcoin in cold storage for the benefit of the United States of America, fantastic. I don't think that's super realistic, but I do think it's realistic that, and even American citizens, we get more American citizens who just say like, hey, this stuff is valuable. I trust this. I believe in the long-term vision of this stuff. I think that's how you build a groundswell. That's how you build a movement. And then, when our next president like comes into office, they read a report where, someone says, by the way, how America is like the gun capital of the world. And there's like, per capita X number of guns for every single American. Well, Bitcoin's the same way now. Like Americans hold a ton of Bitcoin, and it's not like it's all held at Coinbase. It's held in, treasurers, ledgers, steel, paper wallets and safe deposit boxes, steel buried up under the mountain. It is all over the place in America. It is penetrated into the society because its values align with ours. And at that point, the government's like, all right, well, we might as well throw some in the treasury, because why not?
Right? We can only hope, right? Because that's my biggest worry, is that the government fucks it up. Because what we're seeing now, a lot of headlines in recent weeks of a lot of companies starting mining operations throughout North America, whether it be the United States or Canada. A lot of hype around mining in America in the last few months. And it is, observationally up to this point, individual entrepreneurs embarking on these entrepreneurial endeavors. And what my worry is that you have U.S. businesses sort of utilize Bitcoin and use Bitcoin to their benefit, and that gets to a certain scale, particularly mining. Mining is what I'm worried about most, and the government tries to confiscate these operations and they use that as a choke point to hurt Bitcoin in the long run.
They certainly could do that. I think it'll be in their interest. And this is, if Bitcoin's going to work, it has to be in everyone's interest, and that includes the government. I think that the government's going to decide, hey, we should probably like maybe start mining a little bit ourselves. Where are you going to get those fresh Coinbase coins to pay off your North Korean defector, if not from your own the NSA's own mining farms?
If they do come to that conclusion, like, will there be hey, we get priority over this energy because we're the government and we should mine first? Like, will they start an eminent domain for the cheap energy so that they can mine over American citizens?
I don't think so, because I think that, and I think that this is pretty common for Bitcoiners. I think that in general, the government isn't as competent and nefarious as you might think. I think that they want to do things the right way. They probably want to see themselves as the good guys. Like, there certainly are some, sociopathic, Machiavellian types, but I don't think that there's anyone like thinking that deeply about like, oh yeah, let's like seize the means of production to like take over Bitcoin mining and like make it all state run.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I hope not to. I'm trying to adversarial think here.
Sure. No, and that's great. But I think that my whole thing is like, I think that we convince them that this is in their interest. And I think that ultimately they're going to look at the reality, which is that this stuff does empower individuals, which is why it's like fundamentally positive for American values and positive for anyone who wants that in the world. And if the government could say, oh, we want a ton of money and we want to like take this over, but it's honestly better if some of that power is shared. It's better if that power is distributed and decentralized. And we still have, enough pieces of our democracy and of our republic functioning that I think that people in government will respond to the incentives of like, let's not do things that are going to piss off all our constituents, and seizing property is a good way to piss off all your constituents. I think that we're not in the, I think that you're kind of alluding towards like the gold thing that happened in the 30s. And I think that like, this goes back to our talk about social media. Like, the 30s also was a time when you had radio and it was new and there was no television, and it was like, and Roosevelt could go into people's living rooms every night and talk directly to them and spread his message. And he was the only show in town. And so, of course, he was able to do whatever the hell he wanted and get elected 4 times. Like, that's not the media environment that we operate in anymore. If the government starts doing stuff like that, it's going to be all over social media.
But you can tell they want to sort of keep that power, right? And keep that
that type of relationship between quote unquote gatekeepers and the common man.
Totally. But I also think that that's just this struggle that we're going through right now. Ultimately, technology is going to decide which side wins.
Right, like the AK-47.
Exactly.
It didn't matter.
And
it was a better technology.
And guess what? Technology is on our side. So,
yeah,
I should probably wrap up.
Yeah, you got a party to get to, a holiday party. Sorry for keeping you.
No problem. It's fun.
And you have any parting notes you want to leave the freaks?
Nope. At Hector Rosekrans, I'm not super covert on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter. Hit me up at Hector at team.casa if you're interested in talking about our products. But yeah, that's about it.
Dude, I appreciate you swinging through.
Totally.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your service, and peace and love, freaks.
Thanks for having me.